Dear students, good morning. I hope you all have enjoyed your Diwali safely and you are all safe, right? So, next in this chapter, we are going to discuss about respiration in organisms. So, this is chapter 10 in our book, and we are going to discuss how the organisms are respiring, that is, how they are breathing, how the respiration takes place, what is respiration, what is breathing, everything we are going to discuss. So what is mean by breathing, respiration, we are all going to discuss in that chapter. Okay, first of all we are going to discuss what is how all living things respire. Okay, so all the living things respire. Respiration, what does mean by respiration? It is a process, it includes breathing. So here the movement of air in and out of the body, it is called as a how the air enters in and comes out, that is what we call it as a breathing. Okay, for example we can say earthworms, you know earthworms, that and all, they will breathe through their skin. Then fishes, which is an aquatic animal, it breathe through the gills. Okay, so in plants how the breathing takes place? Plants have a small tiny pores which is present in the leaves. So that pores called as a stomata, there the respiration takes place. Okay, so next process is we are going to understand how the animals breathe. So breathing, it is a physical action, so that's what I have said, taking in and leaving out. So taking air in to the system and releasing the gaseous waste, which is carbon dioxide, out of a body, that is what we call it as a breathing. So all animals must exchange gas between themselves and their environment on a continual basis. This is happening continuously, right? So there are four types of exchanger, gaseous exchanges takes place. I have already said the integumentary exchange, which occurs through the skin. So that is what we have discussed in the earthworm. Then gills, which exchange gases in water environment. So water environment animals mostly exchange gases with the help of their gills. Next, by insects, what they will do, they will exchange gases through the tracheal systems. Then lungs, which are found in the land animals. So lungs helps to takes place, lungs helps in the respiration process for the land animals. Okay, so let us discuss what is mean by breathing. So breathing, it is the process by which organism obtain oxygen from the air and releases carbon dioxide. So breathing is nothing but, so we are getting oxygen from the air and we are releasing carbon dioxide. So that is what we call it as a breathing. It is mainly a physical process. Here the movement of muscles and skeleton takes place in order to increase the gaseous exchange. So muscles and all, they will what? They will helps in the movement of muscles, which helps to increases the gaseous exchange. Next we will discuss about cellular respiration. So what is mean by cellular respiration? It is taking place inside the living cells where mitochondria is involved for the breakdown of simple food molecules and carbon dioxide, and energy is released in the form of ATP molecules. So cellular respiration, it takes place inside the cell. Here the mitochondria is involved in the exchange of gases. Okay, so it is breaking down the food into simple food and carbon dioxide, and energy is released out. So that is what we call it as a cellular respiration. So I have given briefly, I have explained briefly here why do we respire, for what purpose we have to respire. We respire to get energy from the food. So we have to obtain the energy for our daily process. So for that we have to get the energy from the food. So food contains stored energy. So the food, where we are getting the energy, we are getting the energy from the food what we are taking. So when we respire, the food is broken down in the cells of our body with the help of oxygen, and energy is released. So what happens here? Whenever we are respiring, here the food is broken down into broken down in the cells of our body with the help of the oxygen. The food are broken down with the help of oxygen and energy is released. So during the respiration process, food is broken down with the help of oxygen and the energy is released. So that is what we have defined respiration as, the process by which food is broken down in the cells of the body with the help of oxygen to release energy. So to get energy we have to respire. You are clear, right? Then since respiration takes place in the cells of the body, it is called as a cellular respiration. When the respiration is taking place inside the cells of your body, it is called as a cellular respiration. So I have given this one in an equation form. You can say glucose plus oxygen. What happens then? Carbon dioxide is released plus water plus energy. So when the food is mixed with oxygen and it gets the we are getting the energy and we are releasing out the carbon dioxide, which is a waste gas. Okay, so now let us discuss about breathing. So breathing in this while we are discussing about breathing, we have to discuss mainly about inhalation and exhalation. So already we have discussed what is mean by breathing, right? So breathing is the process by which oxygen rich air is taken in and carbon dioxide rich air is given out with the help of respiratory organs. So with the help of the respiratory organs, oxygen is taken in and carbon dioxide is given out. So that process we call it as a breathing. So I have already said we have to discuss about two main things, inhalation and exhalation. So taking in of air rich in oxygen. So taking in inside the cell. So that process we call it as an inhalation. So the giving out of air. So giving out, we are releasing out air which is rich in carbon dioxide. So giving out is exhalation. So we can define inhalation and exhalation as taking in and giving out. Okay, so taking in is inhalation, giving out is exhalation. Next let us discuss about breathing rate. The number of times a person breathes in a minute is called as a breathing rate. So how many times a person breathes in a minute, that is what we discussed as a breathing rate. So when we need a more energy, we have to we need more amount of oxygen. So more amount of oxygen is supplied to the cells and more food is broken down and more energy is released. Okay, next let us discuss how do we breathe. So how we will breathe? We will breathe with the help of the respiratory systems, right? So respiratory system helps in breathing. So what are the main parts involved in the respiration? So nostrils, nasal cavity, windpipe, lungs and diaphragm. These and all the parts, you can see the parts which is given clearly in your diagram. Okay, so what are the organs involved in the parts involved in the respiratory process? Nostrils, nasal cavity, windpipe, lungs and diaphragm. So breathing here involves the rib cage and the muscular sheath below the chest cavity called as a diaphragm. You can able to see here the diaphragm, right? So it helps in the breathing process. During inhalation, that is you are taking in oxygen, right? That time what happens? The chest cavity increases in the size and the diaphragm moves down and air enters into the lungs. So when you are taking in, the diaphragm moves down and air enters inside the lungs. So what happens during exhalation? So that is breathing out. So at that time the chest cavity reduces in the size and the diaphragm moves up and air is pushed out of the lungs. When you are taking in, the diaphragm moves below downwards and the chest cavity, air is entering inside. When exhalation process, what happens? The diaphragm moves upward and air is pushed out from the lungs. So that is what we call it as a, so this is what how the breathing takes place inside our body. Okay, so now you can see about mammalian respiratory system here. You can able to see here the mammalian respiratory system. When you breathe in fresh air, that is fills the alveoli of the lungs. What happens here? Can you able to see the alveoli that is given here in the diagram clearly? You can able to see that alveoli. So what happens? Alveoli is filled with fresh air. Okay, the air in the alveoli is called as an alveolar air. So the air which is present in the alveoli, we call it that air as an alveolar air. Each alveolus is made up of extremely thin tissue and it is surrounded by a blood capillaries. Can you able to see the alveoli? It is surrounded by blood capillaries. So how the blood capillaries will be? It will be a narrow blood vessels with extremely thin walls. So this arrangement helps in the alveolar brings the alveolar air and blood very close to each other. Here the alveolar movement helps in the respiratory process. When fresh air enters the alveoli, can you able to see here the alveoli? The air enters the alveoli. Oxygen from the air passes into the blood in the capillaries and binds into the red blood cells. At the same time, carbon dioxide passes out of the blood into the alveoli. This entire process we call it as a gaseous exchange. Alveoli, when air is entering inside the alveoli, what it will do? It will passes into the blood and capillaries and it binds with the red blood cells. At the same time, what happens? Carbon dioxide is passed out into the blood through the alveoli. So the entire process we call it as a gaseous exchange. Blood carries oxygen to every cells of our body. So oxygen is supplied to every cells of the body through the blood. Okay, inside the cell, oxygen reacts with the glucose to produce energy. So what happens here inside the cell? So blood is carrying the oxygen. So that oxygen, when it reacts with the glucose, it produces an energy. So the carbon dioxide and water are also produced during this process and removed from the body. I have already explained the respiration definition. So glucose reacts with oxygen, it produces carbon dioxide, water and energy. That's what it is explained. Okay, so how is carbon dioxide is removed from your body? So that how we can explain? So as the blood flows through the body, carbon dioxide formed during respiration passes into the blood and binds the this blood reaches the heart and the heart sends the blood to the lungs. So what happens? So the carbon dioxide is blood reaches the heart and heart, what it will do? It will sends the blood to the lungs. In the lungs, what happened? Carbon dioxide detaches from the red blood cells and enters into the air sacs. Carbon dioxide is removed from the lungs when we breathe out. When we breathe out, the lungs carbon dioxide is removed. So this is the process how we are going to see about how the respiration is happening in mammalians. Okay, I hope you have understand this. Listen the video carefully and you have to answer the 1 marks given in your worksheet. Thank you. Remaining we will see discuss in the next class.